From the Smith Center in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, this is TarHillIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Brandon P. Joining me today, as he always does, is our very own publisher, Mr. Andrew Jones. And Andrew, we just watched North Carolina get off of a 4-game losing streak, defeating Georgia Tech 75-59 today in the Smith Center. The Tar Heels were led in scoring by R.J. Davis, who had 20 points, 10 rebounds. Armando Bacot had 21 points, 13 rebounds, including 7 offensive rebounds. But the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, AJ, is tonight I thought the Carolina's offense looked very fluid, very much more efficient than it has in previous games this season. They ran their offense. They assisted on 15 of their 27 baskets, and that included a night where Caleb Love, again, had another tough shooting night, going 4 for 12 from the field, including 1 for 6 from 3. So, AJ, what was the difference? How did North Carolina turn things around offensively tonight?
Well, Caleb was 4 for 12 from the floor, 1 for 6 from 3, and he had 4 turnovers. And how do you win an ACC game by 16 points? That happens. His off night shooting didn't kind of unravel what they were doing because they were running a designed offense. Hubert said they kind of went back to some basics a little bit, tweaked some stuff, and really mandated running everything through the post. And for the first game this year, Armando Bacot attempted the most shots of anybody else on the floor. That's such a good sign for this team. You have to run our offense inside out, and too often they've been running it outside in. Only 22.8% of their shots today were three-point attempts. They only hit 3 threes, but if you're efficient in the paint, and you're getting the ball to the ACC preseason player of the year in the paint, and you're able to get stuff out of that in the lane as well, you don't have to hit a ton of threes. You're going to be an efficient team. They had a possession late in the first half where they passed up a couple of threes. It ended up in Pete Nance's hands. He sunk a 3 during a run that they had to close out the first half. To me, that was their best possession of the year, and that stretch at the end of the first half was their best stretch of the year. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Brandon, I really like how they shared the ball. Because there was such an emphasis on getting inside, I thought the spacing was better. I thought the driving lanes were better. They had to honor Armando, and he was able to drag a defender enough that those driving lanes weren't impeded at the midpoint to the rim. Guards got to the rim a lot more today as well. So everything that they wanted to do offensively, they were able to do. They could still play better. And I think they will play better down the road. But I thought offensively, this was an enormously important step forward for this team because they took the plan and they executed the plan and they converted while executing the plan, and they got a W as a result.
I have to agree with that. Carolina did finish 3 for 13 from 3, but they did end up shooting 27 to 47 from overall from the field, and that had a lot to do with the points that they got from the paint. Tonight, they outscored Georgia Tech 36-22 in the paint, and that has been a problem for UNC, especially the past 2 games. They were outscored by 92 points, I believe, and that's been an issue for them all year long. But tonight, it seems like they righted the ship and they were tougher in the paint. What did you see in that regard?
So last week, Indiana and Virginia Tech combined for 51 attempted layups and 8 attempted dunks. Today, Georgia Tech had 9 attempted layups. They converted just 4. No dunks. Now, I know the Yellow Jackets are a smaller team, but they like to drive. And a lot of the points giving up in the paint weren't just big guys turning and catching, turning, and scoring. It was open court stuff, transition baskets. It was drives into half court. It was a guy going in the lane, drawing the defense and dishing to somebody. The Tar Heels put a blanket around the area around the basket today and kept Georgia Tech from getting to the rim for the most part, turned them into a jump shooting team, and they were very effective. The other part about being really good in the paint, Georgia Tech came in averaging 13 offensive rebounds a game. They had 1 today, and they had no second chance points today as well. So I thought that Carolina, in that respect, and with what they did offensively, they bowed up and they did Carolina things in this game. And Hubert actually said, and then we're going to hit on that run at the end of the half, but he said that was the first time they looked like North Carolina. This was Carolina basketball tonight, and you saw it in the paints. I think they were plus like 18 or something on the glass. You saw it the way they executed offensively. And then you saw it because they didn't let a lot of easy stuff get off for the Yellow Jackets. And that's how you win an ACC game by 16 points, especially doing a lot of stuff well, checking boxes that they weren't checking the last few weeks.
Yeah, and speaking of that run, it was a 16-2 run to end the first half, and I thought that was the most significant part of the game. That
Yeah.
part of the game kind of showed that North Carolina was the better team, and when they came out, Georgia Tech really didn't get it too much closer to make it ever feel like it was going to be a basketball game after that run. So I do think that run kind of took the heart out of Georgia Tech, and that's something that we're used to seeing with Carolina basketball. So when that run, what was the key to make that run happen?
Well, first of all, it was 24-23 Yellow Jackets. They didn't lead again. It was a 16-2 run to close the half. Caleb Love was on the bench. He came out with 5:39 left. Seth Trimble went in. So the lineup with the starters minus Caleb with Trimble on the floor. They were 5 for 7 from the floor. They had what was it? Three assists, I think, in that stretch. They had 2 steals. Trimble had 2 rebounds, 2 steals, 1 steal, excuse me, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, hit a couple free throws, and they really moved the ball very well in the half court. They approached the half court during that sequence almost as if it was secondary break like in the sense they were getting such good quick shots. The awareness was high. The recognition was high, the connectivity was high, and it was in that sequence that 3 by Nance occurred that we mentioned a little bit earlier here in this podcast. So 16-2, they built a 13-point halftime lead, I think it was. It never got closer than 11, and this team has lacked having those foot on the throat runs so far this season. They just haven't had those kinds of runs against decent teams. That is, again, a patented part of what makes Carolina basketball. So on a night where they're coming off a 4-game losing streak and they just had exams this week and they had a few practices and that was it, they did a lot of things today that looked like Carolina basketball. If you had been on Mars the last month and you dropped in today and you knew what this team was supposed to be and all you had to go by was today, you'd think, yeah, they're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
They looked a lot more like who they should be today than they have at any time this year, and this should be a building block moving forward. You know, Caleb Love said after the game, and he kind of said this yesterday when we talked as well, but he told me after the game today, you know, we needed this. We needed to go through something like this. I think they recognized that they really needed to cut the cord. And I asked Hubert about that today in the press conference. He said they did, and they still do. But losing 4 in a row and being the fastest team to go from preseason number 1 to out of the poll in history and to become the first preseason number 1 team to ever lose 4 straight games, if that doesn't humble you, nothing will. And they played today like a team that crashed and was in the process of rebounding up, like a ball hitting the floor and coming back up. And perhaps when we talk in 2 months, 3 months, we're doing one of these after a game, we're going to look back at this 4-game stretch that they just had, and really the first 9, because they didn't play that great even when they were winning. And we're going to say, you know what? That team grew during that period because they shed a lot of bad skin that they didn't need anymore. They don't need skin from last year. That's gone. They have to get rid of all of it. I think today they shook a lot of that stuff off, and maybe the 2022-23 Tar Heels were born today.
Well, you actually kind of touched on this a little bit just now, but I was just wondering they all come up the 4-game loser streak. They came home today. They had their best performance. So what does this mean? Is this something that can be carried into the future, or is this just a 1-game performance?
Yeah, I think I jumped ahead of you there, didn't I, Brandon?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I tend to do that. I step on toes all the time. That's one of my specialties. That and Twitter typos that I get alerted to all the time by people. Yeah, I think what it means is what I just said. This was such a healthy performance. They needed to win, and I kind of viewed today like I did last year when they came off that stretch at Miami and Wake where they barely beat BC and they barely beat Virginia Tech, but they got wins, right? They needed to win today. But they got to win by checking the kinds of boxes that Hubert's going to. I'll tell you right now, Hubert's going to sleep well tonight. Hubert's probably going to enjoy his meal tonight. And he and his coach are going to sit there and say, okay, that's there. We know what we can do. They got that feeling for the first time in a long time, but they got it as a new group. They got it with Trimble playing a significant role, being on the floor when they made that run. I asked Caleb, so how is it important that they made the run and you were on the floor? And he said it was huge because their whole objective is to hang one of those banners up there. But they weren't playing like it through the first 9 games. They didn't play like their hair was ever on fire. They did to a degree today, but it was controlled and it was connected. And when 5 guys are playing connected, everything they do is quicker. Everything they do is more decisive. Everything they do carries more weight on the floor. We saw that on both ends of the floor. We saw it on the glass. We saw it on the open court. They had 17 fast break points today to 3 for Georgia Tech. So this was a really thorough performance. Their best one since the first half of the national title game. And I think this is something that could carry over. And if it does, I think they're going to win for a while.
I would have to agree with you. I do think today was their best performance, but AJ, they are breaking things down here at the Smith Center. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. Again, North Carolina ends a 4-game losing streak with a 75 to 59 win over Georgia Tech. UNC will be back in action on Tuesday against the Citadel. THI will be there for full coverage, and we'll see you after the game. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. All right. We'll go back in here and we'll see what the deal is.